Well, hello everybody and welcome along to Snetterton for the third weekend of racing in the 2022 GT Cup Championship. We're here on the Snetterton 300 circuit. Warm weather is forecast all weekend. There's a slight breeze, and over the course of the two sprint and two pit stop races that we'll have, I'm sure we're going to see some fantastic racing, as we did last time out when we were at Brands Hatch on the Grand Prix circuit, supporting the World GT Challenge Europe, where there was a great entry of cars, many of the spectators having come along to see MotoGP star Valentino Rossi. So let's look back at some of the highlights from Brands Hatch. It was a strange start for round 5 of the championship, our first sprint race. Contact on one of the formation laps between Graham Tilley's Mercedes and one of the Top Cats racing with Hex Lamborghinis caused damage to both vehicles, so the safety car stayed out for an extra lap to ensure everything was safe. When the race got fully underway, Morgan Tilbrook led the charge from Ian Loggy and Steve Burgess at the wheel of the Radical. However, for Jason Garrett in the Petrolhead Motorsport BMW E46, off and into the gravel at Druids. Morgan Tilbrook would pick up the lead of the race, but the extra pace of the Group GTO Radical would see Steve Burgess get the overall lead, whilst for the lead of Group GTH, there was a great fight going on between the Veluga Motorsport number 50 Porsche and Callum Jenkins at the wheel of the Team Hard Ginetta. Steve Burgess, the race leader, made a mistake at the wheel of the Radical, which allowed Morgan Tilbrook to retake the lead, and there was contact up at Paddock Hill Bend between one of the Make Happen Mercedes and Phil Carter's McLaren. He was off backwards into the gravel. Steve Burgess would continue to lead, only just though, but with the McLaren stricken in the gravel trap, out would come the safety car, and thankfully for Steve Burgess, he just managed to get a couple of back markers between himself and the rest of the pack. The race would get back underway, and Morgan Tilbrook had to get on it. He'd got Simon Orange at the wheel of the Orange Racing powered by JMH McLaren right on his tailpipes when the race got back underway. And there was also a great fight going on between Ian Campbell and the light green Mercedes of Mike Price. Trouble through the back markers. Rob Trenker couldn't get out of the way. Callum Jenkins almost lost the lead at the wheel of the Group GTH Ginetta, but then a trip into the gravel trap at Paddock Hill Bend would see him lose the group lead. The checkered flag, though, would fly. Steve Burgess would claim the win and make it 5 different race winners out of the first 5 races in 2022. It was going to be Simon Orange and Morgan Tilbrook on the front row of the grid, and when the lights went out, the two McLarens were pretty much together. The light green Mercedes, though, of Mike Price was a little bit slow away and was coming under pressure from Lucky Kira through turn number 1. Good battles down through the order as Sam Alpass at the wheel of his unique BMW was looking to try and make progress, but there was contact in the early stages, and getting turned around was the JMH McLaren of Patrick Collins. The lead battle in Group GTB was a great one between the two BMWs until Sam Alpass made a mistake and spun his BMW as he went round through Stirling's. But for the Radical in the hands of Ben Dimmock, he was managing to keep his car well and truly ahead of a raft of Ginetta GT3s. A spin at Sheen Curve into the barriers for car number 10 and out of the race for Callum Jenkins. And there was also a great battle for the lead of Group GTH, the two Veluga Motorsport teammates going at it tooth and nail. A great move from Ian Campbell saw him sneak up the inside of Ben Dimmock's car, which then lost further places to Ian Loggy and to Mike Price as well, but it still continued to lead Group GTH. For Ben Dimmock, though, almost, he got caught out with a little bit of traffic as they were heading up in towards Druids. Slight contact between himself and a GT4 McLaren. The pit window opened for those cars in Group GTO, Group GT3 and Group GTC. As expected, they all pitted at the sharp end of the window, and it would be Ian Loggy, who had less time to serve in the pit lane, that would be picking up the lead of the race. But he was soon passed by the pro, Michael O'Brien, who brought the McLaren back in to what would ultimately be the lead of the race and on to a win. Morgan Tilbrook had vacated the number 66 McLaren and handed it over to Marcus Clutter, but that car would have to serve a drive-through penalty as a result of a pit lane infringement. A spin in the latter stages, though, for Adrian Watton into the gravel trap at Stirling's would not bring out the safety car. With 3 minutes to go, a red flag was given, so it was the car number 66 of Michael O'Brien that took the win. When the race got underway, unfortunately, we were about to complete 2 formation laps, but Mike Price was weaving a bit too much, really, got caught out on the second formation lap and pitched his Ram Racing Mercedes into the barriers. With that stricken across the side of the track, safety car stayed out for the best part of 10 minutes, and we finally got racing underway with, as ever, in a straight line, the Group GTO Radical of Ben Dimmock very quick in a straight line. Ian Campbell tried to brave it out around the outside, but eventually had to give way to the Radical, and that dropped the McLaren down a position. He then came under attack from John Dillon, who ran his Lamborghini out wide and almost lost a second position to the Group GTC leading car at the time, which was Lucky Kira's Ferrari. For the lead of the race, it was always about the two McLaren 720Ss, with Morgan Tilbrook trying to hold off Simon Orange. We had a spin out on the back section of the circuit for Tom Webb, and also a very scary moment through the fastest section up at Hawthorne for Simon Orange, who hung on to it, lost a couple of car lengths, and a lap later was right back onto the coattails of the race leader. But it would be Morgan Tilbrook in the Enduro Motorsport car that would come through to claim its second win of the 2022 championship season. The damp track is the final race of the weekend, and we get things underway with a good start from Simon Orange as they propel themselves up towards a greasy Paddock Hill bend for the first time. Hopefully everybody just treading with an element of caution as they work their way through Paddock Hill bend, which really drops away on the exit, easy to run wide. Morgan Tilbrook already down into third and now into fourth, albeit John Dillon is off and in the gravel. He digs his way back out. That drops him way down through the order. Off, I'm afraid, is the pit lane starter, Callum Jenkins. He lost the tail end of the car on the grass, I would imagine, coming out of Druids. A quick replay of it. Car runs wide. Yeah, wet tarmac, wet grass, and the inevitable happens, I'm afraid. I think Roy Millington might lose out here. Is John Curry going to squeeze the Merc up the inside? Yes, he does. The door's left open, so Tim Kresic looks to try and work his way through as well at the wheel of the Par Motorsport Porsche, and then he's straight at the inside of Charlotte Gilbert's Lamborghini as well. So Charlotte Gilbert, this new Lamborghini for her this season. So used to seeing her in the Marcos Mantis over the last couple of years. She's amongst the squabbles of the fellow GTC cars, with the likes of Roy Millington's Ferrari alongside her, and also the GTH cars with their red windscreen headers, as you can see. So it's certainly made for an intriguing race, this one. Up towards the braking area for Druids. That was the number 25 car of Kaveh Junda just going through and ahead of Roy Millington's Ferrari, which really seems to be struggling in these conditions. Under pressure from Charlotte Birch. Sasha Kakin with the BMW with two wheels on the grass, just about manages to hang on to it. The door's open though, so through goes Phil Carter in the McLaren. Also Alex Stevenson in the Group GTC Ginetta is trying to wiggle his way through, but he has to be content with sticking at the back of that little train at the moment. Into the pit lane though. Now that is the car that was leading the race. Into the pit lane comes the number 67 Orange Racing, powered by JMH Simon Orange McLaren. So 34 minutes to go. There'll be many of the cars will be struggling around on the tyres that they're on and just waiting for the pit window to open, rather than pit before the window, wait for it to open. With three wide here as well, this could get interesting. Sasha Kaka trying to get to the inside of Charlotte Gilbert, makes it stick. The E46 BMW goes through and then dives at the inside of Roy Millington's Ferrari as well. 2 places gained there for the E46 M3. So this is a quick replay. This will be Charlotte Gilbert all over the curbs on the outside of Surtees, loses the tail end of the Hex.com backed Top Cats Lamborghini, and not unsurprisingly, with the pros suited and booted for those that have a pro driver to hand over to, all of those are diving for the pit lane. So that's going to shuffle the order. It is 26, driver change taking place. Timo Shahan in to hand over to Tom Roach. The number 77 car that was leading Group GTH, Mark Hopton, is in to hand over to Ewan Hankey. This is the car that is now second in the race, Lucky Kira. So John Dillon leads, Lucky Kira there in the Ferrari, second, but also leading Group GTC. He leads his class for those cars built to challenge specification, whether it be the Ginetta G56 Super Cup, whether it be the Ferrari Challenge, whether it be the Lamborghini Super Trofeo, whether it be Porsche Carrera Cup. Ollie Webb, what's he going to try and do? He tries to throw the dummy. He's trying to sneak his way up the inside. There's almost contact with the rear end of the Lamborghini, but nothing doing now. Andrea Amici then a little bit wide, coming out of Paddock Hill bend, but gets over to defend the position. Michael O'Brien now tries around the outside. Now, Ollie Webb and Michael O'Brien, the two McLarens, are for position, but they are both off the lead lap of the race because the race leader is directly ahead of them, and O'Brien took the opportunity to go through there. There's Lucky Kira in second position, but Marcus Clutton is right with him. So this is the fight for second and third in the race. Lucky Kira can get overtaken by the McLaren and would still lead the group because it's a Group GTC Ferrari being hounded by a Group GT3 McLaren. And I would imagine with the pro driver Marcus Clutton behind the wheel of it. And it's not Lucky Kyrgios, sorry, it's David McDonald, isn't it, who's sharing the car with him. Lucky usually drives on his own, but it's David McDonald for this weekend. Yeah, stays out of harm's way, doesn't need to get involved in the battle of the GT3 cars. So up towards the final corner, there's 10 seconds on the clock. I don't quite think he's going to make it towards the start-finish line before the checkered flag. It's going to be tight, you know. He might just squeeze one further lap out of this one. And as they go over the start-finish line, wow, no, just bang on as it got to 0. Out comes the checkered flag. It is a win in round 8 of the GT Cup Championship for the Scott Sport pairing of John Dillon and Andrea Amici. They come through to claim the victory. So there we go, that was what happened at Brands Hatch, but it's all now about Snetterton this weekend. The cars for the first of 4 races this weekend, our first of 2 sprint races that we'll have, one today, one tomorrow, are on the grid. And I'm delighted to say, joining me in the commentary box is the reigning GT Cup champion. Sam Neary joins me in commentary this weekend. Sam, great to have you along. Another great weekend race, another great weekend of racing ahead.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's a pleasure to be in the commentary box. It's the first time for me. But, you know, it's 20 degrees outside. Definitely shorts weather, and hopefully it's going to be a great race.
You alluded to the weather. You know, as ever at Snetterton, we've got a bit of a breeze, but it's a warm ambient temperature. It's only the sprint race, you know. But this is a new tyre that Pirelli have introduced into the championship and other championships for this year. Sprint race, much drop off in it over the shorter distance in these conditions, do you think?
The new Pirelli is very interesting. It doesn't seem to hold on as long as the old tyre did, especially in the GT3 car. But the GT4 car, from what I've heard, is brilliant. So I think you will see a little bit of tyre drop off, but with the low fuel you run for a 25-minute race, it shouldn't really affect these cars. And the sprint race is always brilliant because you don't get that point where you get tired, so it's flat out for 25 minutes, and it's always delivers great racing.
There might be a few people at home maybe wondering why you're not on the grid for this weekend. Just tell us why.
We couldn't get the GT3 car ready in time, sadly. We're sort of preparing it for when we're here in British GT. We were supposed to be here in the GT4 car, but the AM drive had other commitments this weekend with business and stuff, so I'm here in the commentary box instead.
And we're delighted to have you, obviously, you know, not being here this weekend, that's put a dint in your championship aspirations to try and become potentially the first person to go double in the GT Championship back-to-back, so that's in the GT Cup Championship. That's unlikely to happen, but you'll be back for the rest of the season, you know, providing you can dovetail your commitments with GT Cup and British GT.
Yeah, hopefully. The plan is obviously to do more races. I love the GT Cup Championship. It's always been a good place for us. Alton Park, I think I might be at Nürburgring instead, but possibly Silverstone. We should be out with hopefully with our GT4 car, which will be brilliant because as we see, the GTH grid is a brilliant grid.
It's a competitive grid to say the least. You can see the 1 minute board is just being held aloft, or the 1 minute gantry as we've got here now at Snetterton, this new gantry that was installed over the course of the weekend. You can see the final few pit crew members just leaving the grid, and we will be able to see the cars off onto the formation lap very, very shortly indeed. Now, the times that were set in qualifying give us this grid, not necessarily the times set by the actual driver, because in some cars one driver can qualify it but another one can maybe race it. But it's also important to get a good lap time in this race, Sam, because the lap time you set in this race sets the grid for the endurance race later on.
Yeah, exactly. That's the key to this sprint race. When you have a really bad sprint race that's going on, you try and sort of get yourself a gap so you can get the fastest lap so you can be on pole for the next race. We've had that a few times where we've made mistakes in this race. We just sacrifice this and try and get pole position for the feature race.
So any pro drivers that are in the entry list cannot race in the sprint races. If you are a pro sporting driver, you can do one of the 2 sprint races over the course of the weekend, Sam, can't you, as they head off on their formation lap. So let's just then guide you through the grid then, and the way that they will line up for this first race of the GT Cup Championship here at Snetterton for this weekend. Pole position goes the way of Morgan Tilbrook, and alongside is Ian Lockie, with row 2 being Ian Campbell and John Dillon in the Lamborghini. The third row of the grid, on the inside, it's Simon Orange in the McLaren, and alongside him is Mike Price's Mercedes. Then it's Richard Chamberlain and Graham Tilley that's on row number 4. On to row number 5. The inside of row number 5, the McLaren number 44, is started by Steve Ruston, and alongside is Ferrari of Lucky Kira, with the next row of the grid being Jensen Lunn in a Lamborghini, alongside Steve Burgess in his Radical. The 7th row of the grid sees on the inside Charlotte Gilbert line up alongside Roy Millington's Ferrari, with row 8 being comprised by Stephen Walton and Will Dendy Sadler. Will Dendy actually is driving the number 17 car. It's not shown on the graphic there. because there's 3 drivers sharing that car. Onto the next row of the grid, the number 50 car. It is James Wallace that lines up alongside number 25, which is Kavi Jundi. And row number 10, it is Tamer Shahan alongside the number 77 Greystone McLaren in the hands of Mark Hopton. Row 11 of the grid is Philip Carter's McLaren and John Curry's Mercedes, with row 12 being Tim Kresick at the wheel of the Caffeine 6 by Par Motorsport Porsche, alongside the first of the Trade Centre Formula Woman McLarens, which is Jodie Schloss, who drives that one, making her debut in the championship. And the final row of the grid, it's the other Trade Centre Formula Woman McLaren, which is Sarah Mizur, alongside number 80, which is the American driving for Greystone GT, again Ron Trenker. So that's the grid that we've got. It's a full grid. It's 26 cars that qualified, a little down on what we were expecting, because a few cars either haven't been prepared like yours. There's another few cars that have had issues earlier on in the week with either mechanical issues or incidents in testing, so we're a little bit down, but 26 cars is still a competitive grid, and the championship year on year, Sam, just seemed to raise the bar, doesn't it?
The championship is just getting better and better, and I don't think we've seen the best of GT Cup yet. It is just every year it's stepping up, so from 2021 and now to this year, they've really done a great job. And we know at Snet, 26 cars is still enough to have a big pile up at turn 2, which is always a pinch point here at Snet. So you need to be careful through turn 2, and once you make it through turn 2, that's when you start racing properly. Yeah.
Turn 2 being the Wilson hairpin as it is now. Yeah, so that's the tight one. But you've also got those long straights. In particular the Bentley straight here at Snetterton, which is a very, very long straight. Now, particularly in a GT3 car, that must be unbelievably quick when you head down in towards Brundle and Nelson at the bottom of the straight. Yeah,
definitely. GT3 cars, they are just unbelievable cars. They are so quick. They are pretty surprising to a lot of people how quick they are. If you ever get a chance to sit in one, I would highly recommend.
You know where I am. See, no reply there. There wasn't a, oh yes at any point. Yeah, so no. So here we go then. They're getting themselves into neat 2x2 order, ready for the start of this 25-minute race, which is going to be round 9 of the 2022 GT Cup Championship. Remember, it's Morgan Tilbrook in the Enduro Motorsport, largely orange and blue McLaren that sits there on pole position. Ian Loggie's dark blue and pink Mercedes that's alongside. Row 2 of the grid, it's largely white and yellow McLaren of Ian Campbell alongside the blue and white Lamborghini in the hands of John Dillon. So neat 2x2 order. We get the race underway. Round 9 of the 2022 Championship is go here at Snetterton with Morgan Tilbrook getting a good stop. Ian Loggie looking to try and brave it out around the outside. They go side by side. The first few rows are still side by side into and out of Richie's corner, the first corner, but it is Morgan Tilbrook that has taken up the lead. Ian Loggie settles into second place. Oh, and Ian Campbell onto the grass, cannons into the side of Ian Loggie, and John Dillon had to take to the grass in avoidance there. Didn't quite see what put Ian Campbell onto the grass, Sam, but that was quite a hefty impact, wasn't it, into the side of the Merc?
Yeah, sadly I think I've already got the commentator's curse saying turn 2 as a pilot point. But yeah, we didn't really get a close look on that, but from what it looked like he was on the grass on the right hand side, possibly pushed out there from braking, and when you're trying to stop on the grass, it doesn't work.
No, poor old Ian Campbell won't be happy at all, but equally as much, very much the innocent party was Ian Loggie, and then John Dillon, whilst I thought he initially avoided the contact, he then spun later on. So we continue for the moment. Cars limping away from the scene, but it looks as though that front left suspension has gone on Ian Loggie's car. Ian Campbell's is limping round, and wouldn't surprise me if we saw a safety car, but for the moment, we still keep racing, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't see the full damage on the Ian Loggie car, but Mercs are built very strong. They can survive a good whack here and there, so hopefully he's not out of the race, and we'll see if a safety car comes out.
And there speaks a man from experience. So the race continues in the meantime as they head downhill in towards a braking area for Brundle and Nelson. Graham Tilley in the red and Dayglow Mercedes coming under attack from the Top Cats with Hex.com Lamborghini that sits behind. It looks as though John Dillon has finally got moving and is on his way, and it also looked as though Ian Campbell was still limping around the circuit. So apologies that Sam's headset is a little bit low in terms of volume. We're working on the technical issue at the moment, ladies and gentlemen. Sam will be back with us very, very shortly. So the race continues in the meantime. Over the start-finish line they will come. Morgan Tilbrook leads, and because of that incident, he leads by a country mile at the moment. He is 4 seconds up the road than anybody else, because of course the incident occurred directly behind him. So all of the cars that got snaffled up there at the Wilson hairpin hopefully now have managed to sort themselves out, but that has allowed Morgan Tilbrook and Sam Neary, who fingers crossed is back with us now, to open up a very large margin.
Yeah, exactly. It's always nice to have a large margin on your first lap. It makes a big difference to start a race. You can sort of forget about your mirrors then and focus on the race in front, and just build that gap even more every lap.
Yeah, so 4 seconds to the good from Simon Orange, the number 67 car that's in second place. There is the black Ferrari, that's Lucky Kira. He is looking to try and see what he can do in Group GTC, which is for the newer Challenge spec cars. And he is right behind the car that leads Group GTC at the moment, which is the first of the two Top Cats Racing with Hex.com Lamborghini Huracans, which is the number 9 car in the hands of Jensen Lund for this race. They are bottled up behind Graham Tilley's Mercedes, that's a GT3 spec car. So that is for the lead of Group GTC. Looks so Ian Loggie's got going again as well. You said Mercedes were built strong. Considering the whack, I'm enormously impressed.
Yeah, I'm also very impressed by that. It seems like he'll probably come into pits anyway, just for a quick customary check. But as I said, this is before. Once you have an issue like this, it's now go for fastest lap. So I'm sure we'll see Ian bringing out, showing everything he can do, and that just looks like a puncher to me.
Yeah, puncher, and not too much damage to the side of that either. So I think they both largely got away with lightish, what looks like cosmetic damage more than anything else, but we'll wait and see. So Ian Campbell still limping the car back, doing his very best to try and stay out of harm's way, but equally as much keen to get back to the pit lane as you suggested, because team check it out, the suspension's okay, stick a new tyre on it, go out there, do some fast laps, and it gets you in a good grid position for later on today.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole plan for them too now. So I'm sure we'll see both of them lighting up the sectors with purple. So that'll be interesting to see.
The other thing I need to try and keep an eye on is what's going on for the lead of Group GTO as well, because the Steve Burgess and Ben Dimmock Radical has now moved up into second position in the race. Into the pit lane and he does come, Ian Loggie. They're putting it on the dollies, which is not a good sign, I'm afraid to say. But yeah, the Radical's now up into second position, gained 2 places on that lap, got past Mike Price and got past the number 67 car of Simon Orange. So watch out for that Radical. And I think it's quick in a straight line, but it's not quite as good through the corner. So whilst I think he gained some places, I think he's been subsequently picked off again and lost a few.
Yeah, the Radical, I remember racing it last year. In a straight line, it is a rocket ship. It's unbelievable. But yeah, so will be interesting to see what that car can do and if it can move further up the grid.
It must have had a problem because it was second over the line, whereas it's now behind Graham Tilley, which would put it to something like 7th in the race. So it's clearly had a problem at the start of this lap. So 25 minutes to go. It had a spin, the Radical, so that was why it dropped down through the order and is now having to carve its way back through again. So that's a bit of a problem and a shame for them as they look to try and work their way back through the order. Steve Burgess, the man from Nottingham, on board for this race, but Morgan Tilbrook out front, leading by 6.2 seconds from Simon Orange, who's got Mike Price and Richard Chamberlain right behind him. So Simon Orange, another former champion like you, who's stepped up to GT3 this year. You know, he's an amateur driver. I've been enormously impressed with Simon Orange driving that McLaren for the first time this year.
Yeah, I have as well. He's this year. I thought, you know, jumping into GT3 it'd take a couple of seasons to get used to the car, but he's jumped in and he's been megally impressive to see Ian Loggie going back out. And this is where you're going to see the fast lap times now coming in. Also, he's got a little bit of split damage on the right hand side, but hopefully that won't make too much difference to the Mercedes.
Yeah, Ian Loggie, typical sort of fiery Scotsman. He won't be happy with that. He'll want to try and get his head down and push as hard as he possibly can and drive the only way he knows, which is flat out, really. Ian Loggie, a driver who is very busy this year with his commitments in this championship, other championships. He's doing a 24-hour race in Portimao in a few weeks' time as well. He's been racing in the Radical Middle Eastern Championship over the winter. Something like 70 races he told me he was having this year, which, you know, he's got to be fit. He's not in the first flush of youth here, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying he's not one of the younger drivers in the field, but he is unbelievably fit, isn't he?
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but I actually think he could out-bench press me, to be honest.
Me and you combined, I think. Me and you combined. So back to the squabble that's going on for second and for third position. Simon Orange under attack. We're also now looking at what's going on in Group GTH. So this is the number 69 Make Happen Racing Stephen Walton driven Mercedes that's under enormous pressure from the Veluga Motorsport Porsche, trying to squeeze its way through. Jinx one way, jinx the other, looks up the inside, heading in towards Palmer. Doesn't quite work, however, though, for James Wallace. James Wallace, one of the youngsters that's come through into GT Cup this year. Now, James couldn't even test yesterday at the wheel of that Porsche. The reason being, he was at school doing a GCSE. Unbelievably quick, and for a driver that's got no karting experience, this is the number 50 Porsche, was racing in Fiesta Juniors and has come into a GT4 car on slicks and is at the front end of GTH. Hugely impressive. Yeah,
megally impressive. I was mega impressed with him at Brands Hatch as well. Them two were very side by side almost every race. he has been really impressive this year so far. You know, you got to take your hats off to anyone who can just jump in a GT4 and be quick.
And I think it's the way he also carries himself as well as a racing driver. As a bit of traffic and back Mark Galabri goes on, as John Dillon dives up the inside of the number 77 Mark Hopton McLaren. When I was 16 years of age, I was still messing around and being immature. I still am now I'm nearly 50, but he's just such a mature young man and does all of his talking behind the wheel. And look at the pressure that he's putting under Stephen Walter. So the Make Happen Racing Mercedes just ahead of the Porsche that lies behind. That is for second and third in Group GTH. They've got Roy Millington's Ferrari that sits behind. He is just in the process of being overtaken by John Dillon, who's still trying to make his way through the traffic after his problems as well. So it means that leading Group GTH in this early stage is the number 17 McLaren in the hands of Will Dendy, who is a fair chunk up the road from Mercedes and Porsche, but it's nice to see three different manufacturers in the top three in Group GTH. Here is the Group GTH leader now, Will Dendy. Not really seen him in GT Cup before. He first started racing many years ago and has settled in GT Cup this year and has driven beautifully well. He leads the group.
Yeah, GT4 has been sort of staple of GT Cup for the past 2 years, and sadly, as we see Ian Loggy getting out of the car, so that looks like he's out this race, sadly.
Yeah, Ian Loggy was hoping to maybe be right at the sharp end of the championship at the end of the season, but on totting up, that's championship points lost, I'm afraid, for the Scotsman, out of the race. And I've got to say, through no fault of his own, and that's not blaming Ian Campbell, because we couldn't see what started the incident and put Ian onto the grass in the first place, but he was just the wrong place, wrong time, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Turn 2 is always that sort of corner which does cause incidents to that. As soon as you're going that quick into the corner, if you have an incident further on, you're always going to end up right in the point where you're hitting someone. So sadly for Ian, I think he was just the innocent bystander in that.
Now Richard Chamberlain needed to get the hurry up here, doesn't want to lose contact with the cars that lie ahead, so squeezes his way through and up the inside of the Paddock Motorsport McLaren to try and hang on to the coattails of the two Group GT3 cars that lie ahead in second and third place. That's the third place car, the green Mercedes, in the hands of Mike Price, former Porsche racer, who's sharing the car with long-time sports car racer Callum McLeod over the course of this weekend. In fact, Callum McLeod was racing with Ian Loggy in British GT just a couple of weekends ago, wasn't he? But up towards the braking air for Ritchies they come. Second place McLaren, third place Mercedes, fourth place Porsche, and then the gap back to what will be Steve Burgess in the Radical, who's there in fifth place. Graham Tilley is sixth in the Mercedes, and there is the lead battle for Group GTC, is it just going through, Group GTC rather, yeah, which is still Warren Gilbert hanging on to it in the Lamborghini from Lucky Kira, but there's still only half a second between those two, so that's another one it's well worth watching out for. 7th and 8th overall, there you go, there's Lamborghini, there's the Ferrari that sits behind, and right behind them is Steve Ruston in the Group GT3 McLaren. So we've got, wherever you look, good battles going on, some interclass, some not.
Yeah, exactly. The challenge cars are always really good round Snetterton, which is actually really annoying in a GT3 car because they're a lot faster in the straight lines, as you'll see if we keep it on the McLaren in this battle. You'll see them pull away on the straights because they're about 10 mile an hour faster down the back straight.
That is, I'm afraid, that's the car that is the sister car to one that's running right at the sharp end of Group GTH. That's the number 96 car, John Curry, that's had a rotation. That looked like, was that the exit of Murray's? It had the spin there, difficult to tell from that angle, but Merck pointing in the wrong direction. Hopefully, once the heat soak dissipates a little bit, he'll get it fired up and continue round. And that's another problem, is that when we get to these warmer temperatures, spin the car, you get that heat soak, and you're trying to restart it, it won't do it. It just needs the temperature to drop a little bit, doesn't it, before you can get going? Yeah,
there's nothing more frustrating. I'm not saying I've spammed before and stalled, but there's nothing more frustrating than when you're sat there and you're watching everyone go past and the car just won't start up. All you're doing is holding that start button, hoping that it roars back into life and then you can get racing again. But yeah, it is soul destroying as a driver.
Let's just have a look. I think it was the exit of this corner, but yeah, gone now by the look of things. So it's continuing round on its merry way as we get the second and third place battle going back over the start finish line once more. Simon Orange still under attack from Mike Price, whilst the orange machine of Richard Chamberlain sits directly behind. Good to see Richard Chamberlain having a good run, because it's a fairly highly strung car, that Porsche. You know, it's been developed many years. It's all built in-house as well. You know, Richard machines many of the parts onto this himself, so very clever engineering that's gone into this car. A bit like Trigger's Broom, isn't it? It's nothing like the original car, because there's so many things have changed over the year, but it's always good to see it out, and it goes well still.
Yeah, exactly. To be honest with you, Mark, I think every car is Trigger's Broom when it comes to racing. There's not one piece that's the original. Maybe the steering wheel in most cars, but yeah, Richard Chamberlain, that car is incredible. It always looks awesome. And always Richard's idea to go faster is just have more power.
Have you driven it?
Sadly not.
No. You'll await the invitation. A bit like me in GT3s. So up towards the braking area for Oggies. There is the sister car to the one we saw spun a while ago. That is for second and third, still in Group GTH. And by the look of things now, they have got another car beginning to close in on them, which is Mark Hopton by the look of things. So that is going to be Stephen Walton under attack from James Wallace, and then Mark Hopton, who's come up through Greystone's GT programme, getting better and better and better all the time. Greystone doing a really good job again of bringing on these amps, partnering up with very experienced pros, bringing them out of things like the McLaren Pure Series or their performance track days into racing. And it might take a year or so for some of them to get there, but you look at what Mark Hopton's doing moving forward. You look at Ian Campbell and the way he's moved forward. It's a good programme, isn't it, Greystone GT? Yeah,
definitely. I think both the drivers and the team have impressed me. Greystone are a very new team to GT racing. I think last year they started, or 2020 they started, and they have just, they've sort of taken it by storm. They're in British GT, they're in GT Cup, and they're doing really well. They're competing at the
in
top
Europe
level
as well, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So they have taken off massively, and Mark, I remember him starting and quite struggling quite a bit at the first, but as you can see now, he is definitely one of the top drivers in GTH.
Well, you're getting used to the car more, you're understanding it, you're working with your pro and the team a lot more, and also, you're now visiting circuits that you've been to before, whereas you look at poor old Ron Trenker, and again, every circuit he goes to, because he lives in America, it's a new one again. He's got to start all over again every weekend, and it must be tough. It must be tough when you first come into it.
Yeah, definitely. I think the issue is in the UK, all the circuits are very tight as well, which is very different for a lot of drivers. When you jump from a European track to a UK track, you have to tighten your belts a little bit more when you come back to the UK. But no, it's always hard to learn a track in a race weekend and also try and compete.
All of this squabbling that's going on in Group GTH now, because we've now got another car that's coming to join the fun as well, and that is going to be Tamar Shahan at the wheel of the Paddock Motorsport number 26 McLaren. All of this is playing beautifully into the hands of the Group GTH leader, because it looks like Will Dendy in the number 17 orange racing powered by JMH McLaren is just pulling further and further away. He's 3.5 seconds up the road now from a 4-car battle for second, third, fourth and fifth in the group. So fantastic stuff. And also fantastic to see that out this weekend we've got the Trade Centre Formula Woman competitors this weekend. So the girls that have gone through the Formula Woman competition out on circuit for the first time. Cars being run by DTO, and by the look of things they're nose to tail squabbling away. Yeah, exactly. It's always good to see two teammates close to each other, and you can always gauge yourself off the car in front. So this is always interesting, an in-team battle. Hopefully, as we see an overtake from the Veluga Porsche, which was, it looked like it was inevitable at some point, but hopefully we can see Stephen Walton try and come back and make a move back on him. Yeah, good move that from James Wallace. Looks like it's up the inside going in towards Agostini. So Porsche goes up to second in Group GTH, down to third in GTH goes the number 69 McLaren, but Mark Hopton is keen to get in on the mix as well and try and demote that, Mercedes down a further position. And then you've got Tamar Shahan at the wheel of the 26 Paddock Motorsport car, not that far behind. And is there another one not far behind him as well? Philip Carter would be the next one, but he's a couple of seconds adrift, so he's not quite joined in the fun as yet. Or is that Tim Kresick that sits there as well, maybe, that's making his way up through the order? So I think the car that's struggling at the moment, the Make Happen Racing Mercedes, having lost one place, falling away from the Porsche, and now starting to have to defend from the McLaren, that's going to drop him further back again, isn't it, having just lost the place? Yeah, exactly. This is it's never really been a Mercedes track, Snetterton, with the engine being in the front. You struggle quite a lot through the hairpins. The McLaren has always been quick here with the straight lines. So it'll be interesting to see what Steve can do now, see if he can keep onto the back of the Veluga Porsche, which we know is also quick. But he also needs to watch his mirrors to make sure Mark isn't coming past him. And when you say the Mercedes is slow coming around Snetterton because it's front engine coming out of the hairpins, I assume that means you're alluding to the fact that if it's a mid-engine or a rear-engine car, when you're coming out the slower corners, you've got the weight over the driving axle and it pushes you out quicker. Yeah, exactly. When you have the rear engine in the car, as you just said, the traction you get for the slow speed stuff is brilliant, and you'll see it in the GT3 cars as well. The McLaren will be very quick here, and so should the Lamborghini because of that rear engine. It makes a big difference at some tracks. But you'll find a place around Coram, the Mercedes should have a lot more grip than
than a rear-engine car.
Very slight amount of damage to the front right-hand corner of the Radical I just spotted there. So Steve Burgess with a bit of bodywork flapping. Don't think that will cause him too much of a concern. He's still got Graham Tilley's Mercedes not that far behind. So this is 5th and 6th, with 7th and 8th still not too far away. And that is still the lead battle in Group GTC, just off the back of this number 4 Mercedes. In the background, you've got the number 9 Lamborghini of Jensen Lund, still under enormous attack from Lucky Kira, and that is for the lead of the group. Lucky Kira is pushing hard, pushing as hard as he possibly can. He leads the overall championship as well at the moment, doesn't he, Lucky Kira? So he'll want to try and scoop up maximum points in the group if he can.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that's the key to this sort of racing in a championship like this. There's a lot of races, and you have to maximise every single race you get into. The one thing I'm noticing is a lot of black and white flags for people, which means a lot of people are being quite naughty on the track limits. Which is very difficult as a driver. I've struggled with track limits a lot in my career so far. But you know, it's trying to keep it within the white lines and then trying to work out where you can push the white line and sort of cheat a little bit, and where you can't.
I know what you're saying, because when I race here, I'm racing here in a few weekends' time as well, but last time I raced here, I did a track walk, and people always sort of say, oh, a little bit sideways from Jensen Lund. Was there contact there as Lucky Kira got into the back of him? I can't quite tell. But there's a big wiggly moment from Jensen Lund there, and through goes Lucky Kira to take the opportunity and steal the lead of the group away. Now, it'll be interesting to see exactly how close they were in the braking point. I'm not sure there was contact, but it's so difficult to see from the angle we looked at.
Yeah, exactly. It can just be a little bit of a lock-up when the ABS isn't working properly. But we couldn't see properly what it was, but it could have been a tap.
Yeah, I thought Lucky was a bit too far away for it to be a tap, but we'll have to wait and see. I did the track walk around here, and yeah, the few corners where you know you can run wide because you can see there's no sensors beyond the curb line. Those are the ones you utilise.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Some championships decide to use marshals as their gauge, which is always a black and grey area of what a marshal sees. And some championships just use sensors. I love the championships that just use sensors because it allows you to use as much track as possible and be clever with it.
Yep. I'm on the same page of the book there. So we've got 6 minutes to go in this one. Morgan Tilbrook still leads. We've not mentioned him much, largely because he's leading by 15 seconds now. He was 4 seconds up the road at the end of the first lap of the race. The number 67 McLaren of Simon Orange is second, followed by the number 11 Mercedes of Mike Price, who's third. In fourth place, we've got the leading car in Group GTO, which is Richard Chamberlain's orange Porsche. Fifth is the Radical. That is also a car that runs in Group GTO. And sixth at the moment is Graham Tilley's number 4 Mercedes. So this is the battle for second and third place. Simon Orange has been pretty much shadowed by Mike Price for the whole race so far, but again, in typical Simon Orange fashion, he's quick and he just doesn't make mistakes, or they are very infrequent.
Yeah, that's the key to this endurance racing, is just don't make mistakes. Just keep it on the black stuff and try and do a certain lap time over and over and over again, especially when you start doing your 24-hour races and stuff like that. Obviously, this is a sprint race, so it's a little bit different, but it's the same aspect of racing. Mike just has to sit behind and hope he makes a mistake, because Snetterton is renownedly known for not being able to pass. Yeah,
you'd have thought with the big long straights you might stand a bit more of a chance, but you know, in a straight line with the balance of performance that all of these cars have as well, with Jeff Lau and the technical team at GT Cup to try and equalise the performance of a turbocharged car with a rear engine against a naturally aspirated Mercedes with a front engine. You know, there's work to be done to try and equalise the performance of them all.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very sliding scale, the BOP, and a lot of people you're always going to whinge about the BOP when it's not favouring you, and when it is favouring you, you're not going to say a word. But to be honest, they do an incredible job with the BOP. It's so difficult to try and get all these engines equal and all the weights equal, and also aero. It's like an invisible elephant sitting on the car.
Yeah.
So trying to work out who's got more aero and who's got less aero is very difficult, and it is incredible to see the BOP of these cars.
My analogy for the person that's in charge of the balance of performance is it's a bit like being a football referee for children's football. You're just never going to satisfy all of the parents, are you? You're never going to keep everybody happy with your decisions, and it's the same in motorsport. Yeah, that's a job I wouldn't want. So Jeff and his team do a brilliant job of trying to equalise the performance of these cars, and it goes to show, because there has been nothing in the first 22 minutes to split Simon Orange from Mike Price for second and third in this race. Now, Simon Orange has already had an overall race win, a couple of those so far, one at Donington Park and one at Brands Hatch last time out. Mike Price, with a little bit of traffic he needs to carve his way past here, which is Sarah Mizik at the wheel of one of the Formula Woman cars. Sarah is the Jamaican that came through to win in the Formula Woman competition. And that's just dropped Mike Price a little bit further away now, unfortunately. Now, if Mike Price can get through and ahead of Simon Orange, that would be his best result of the season so far, because he's had a third already. That was in the second of the 2 races at Donington Park, the pit stop race, but he's not had a second step on the podium yet.
Yeah, I to be honest, sometimes I prefer getting third, because I think second place is the first loser. But yeah, it's always nice to be higher up on the podium. And just going back to when you're stuck behind traffic, it is there's nothing more frustrating than when you catch a back marker at the wrong point on the lap. It's a love-hate relationship with back markers. Sometimes you see them when the other person's stuck behind them, and you're just reeling them in, and it's lovely. But then when you're blocked beside one, it is very annoying.
The good thing for Morgan Tilbrook there, our race leader, is that he's got such an enormous lead. He can afford to take his time as he worked his way through the front running cars in Group GTH. So he's just picked off the Make Happen Racing Stephen Walton Mercedes, which lost that place earlier on to the Porsche of James Wallace, but hasn't lost any further places, has he? Mark Hopton is still bottled up behind, and Tamer Shahan as well. Here's the charging John Dillon. Now remember, he was sort of stationary and was tangled up in that turn 1 incident. His car is the one that hasn't clearly suffered any damage at all. I thought he'd avoided the contact but then had the spin. He's had to work his way back from the very last place up into 11th position, so good performance there.
Yeah, definitely. I think John Dillon, he's been impressing me massively. He took that Lamborghini a couple of years ago, and he's just been getting better and better. And you've seen it in qualifying today, only being a second off pole position, which for him I think is his closest gap to pole. So he's just getting better and better. And hopefully this is a turning point weekend for John. And they also had that win at Brands Hatch, which is very impressive. Yeah,
hugely impressive. Yeah, the win in the final race, wasn't it, himself and the Italian Andrea Amici, who shares the car over the course of this weekend. Factory Lamborghini driver who's been enormously successful in Super Trofeo, really racing, whether it be in Asia and in Europe over the last few years. Andrea Amici joins the number 61 group and team this year. Scott Sport prepared car of John Dillon, who, as I say, has now worked his way up inside the top 10. So from dead last place at the first corner to a top 10 finish is damage limitation if ever it was.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, I'm sure we'll see quite a quick lap time from John, which hopefully can put him up the grid, and it will sort of mix up the front grid as well.
So we've now got less than 60 seconds to go. We've got Morgan Tilbrook heading very shortly over the start-finish line to start what should be the last lap of the race. So I think he's just flashed his way over the start-finish line now, up towards Richie's corner. And for Morgan Tilbrook, partnered up with Marcus Clutton, they have already had 2 wins so far this season, 2 overall wins. They also took a group win, an extra group win. That was in the first of the 4 races at Brands Hatch, because it was a Group GTO car that won on that occasion. So you could argue they've had 3 group wins so far, 2 of those being overall wins. But of all of the races, this is probably the ideal race, isn't it, for Morgan Tilbrook? At no point has he been troubled. He's been able to push on. He's set a reasonable lap time, albeit he hasn't set the fastest lap of the race, because last time out, that went to Simon Orange in second place, just set the fastest lap of the race, so he's headed to pole. But for Morgan Tilbrook, easy breeze, isn't it, this one?
Yeah, exactly. And sadly, when you do have these sort of races, you get no coverage because you've done so well, which is sort of you're suffering from the success of being fast. But no, as we just saw, Simon Orange he's finally got the message to go and push and get that pole position, which is always lovely to start the next race on pole position.
And he's done it just before he's met the traffic as well, hasn't he? So Mike Price is now tangled up in that traffic as well, trying to squeeze his way through. He goes through and past the Caffeine 6x Palm Sport Tim Creswick car. The next one he'll need to pick off will be Philip Carter's Greystone GT car. And that has just allowed Simon Orange to escape up the road a little bit more. So in towards the bottom section, so through Brundle and Nelson comes our race leader. It looks as though it's going to be another win for Enduro Motorsport and their McLaren, which I noticed is the McLaren they race in British GT they brought out this weekend, rather than the usual one we've seen in GT Cup for this season. 2 are available to them over the course of the season. But for Morgan Tilbrook, it is lap number 14. He has led every single one. It's going to be a lights to flag victory and a win by something like 13 seconds in round 9 of the 2022 GT Cup Championship. Over the start finish line, 3 group wins for the season. That makes it 4. It also makes it 3 overall wins for them now, which strengthens their position in terms of the championship standings. They were only 6 points adrift of Simon Orange and Michael O'Brien, who are leading the GT3 championship standings coming into this one. So that's going to tighten things up, isn't it? Yeah, definitely, which will make the next race really interesting as well, with them 2 starting side by side. So they've both sort of got nothing to lose now if they'll be equal on points. So now it's just whoever wins the next race. We've also seen Simon Orange come through in second place. There's the number 11 Mercedes of Mike Price. He finishes in third position. Fourth place should be the orange Porsche of Richard Chamberlain. He's already over the start-finish line. And then we should see the Radical should be the next one through to take the checkered flag. There goes Steve Burgess now, still chased by Graham Tilley and, by the look of things, Steve Ruston. But Graham Tilley has picked up a time penalty for transgressing circuit limits. So on corrected times, the number 44 McLaren would finish ahead. And there goes Lucky Kira, the number 247 Ferrari, snuck the lead of Group GTC down there at Agostini. Difficult to see whether there was any contact or not, but on the road he's taken maximum points in Group GTC, and that will please him because he's the overall championship leader, wants to win his group to try and stay there.
Yeah, exactly. The key is to win every race you can, and he's just done that.
Who won Group GTH in the end? It was still Will Dendy that secured the win in Group GTH as well. So I'm hoping we can guide you through a full set of graphics very, very shortly. And all of the cars will be returning into the pit lane area where they will service and prepare the cars in advance of what will be the 50-minute sprint race later on, which is scheduled to get underway around about 4:05 this afternoon. The sprint race is scheduled to get underway, but I think everybody now has taken the checkered flag, barring maybe one or two more cars to come through just to take the checkered flag. So last couple just coming through, and then once we get, there goes Roy Millington through. So I think he was the last car to finish on the lead lap, was he, Roy Millington, in 12th position, completed the 14 laps. Anybody else from there backwards was going to be a further lap down. But for Morgan Tilbrook, that was the perfect race, really, winning in the end by 16.3 seconds from Simon Orange, and with Mike Price finishing in third place, that is good championship points for him. Richard Chamberlain winning the group as well. I think that's the first group win this season for Richard Chamberlain. In fact, that's the first points for Richard Chamberlain this season. It's been a tough season for him at the wheel of that orange Porsche. It's nice to get your first win, and nice to do it when you've had such a poor start to the season.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing more satisfying than when you've had a very bad luck and then you come out and you win your next race. It's it's always a good feeling, and it feels like all the hard work you've put in has finally paid off.
I know Richard puts in enormous amounts of hard work. One of the smallest teams with probably the smallest budgets that we've got in the pit lane. So yeah, good to see Richard Chamberlain grab a win. So just to confirm the results, then it's a win for Morgan Tilbrook in the McLaren, with Simon Orange's machine finishing 16.3 seconds adrift. And Mike Price in the Mercedes was there in third. Richard Chamberlain won Group GTO in fourth position ahead of Steve Burgess in fifth, and it was Steve Ruston who finished in sixth place. Graham Tilley was seventh. Lucky Kira won Group GTC in eighth position, and it was Jensen Lunn and John Dillon that wrapped up top 10. In 11th position, it was the second of the Top Cats Racing Lamborghinis, which was Charlotte Gilbert. Roy Millington was there in 12th place, and it was Will Dendy that drove the number 17 car to finish in 13th place. James Mayer was there in 14th place, ahead of Mark Hopton, Tamo Shahan, Philip Carter, Tim Kresick, Stephen Walton, and then the first of the two Formula Woman Trade Centre cars, which was going to be Jodie Sloss, that finished there in 20th position. And then just outside of the top 20, we saw Sarah Mizer finish in 21st position. John Curry had a rotation and finished in 22nd, and Ron Trenker, I think, was the last of the finishers, was he? Maybe in 23rd, with Cavi Jundi in 24th. And we know of the whereabouts of Ian Logie and Ian Campbell, both of those involved in that turmoil incident and heading back towards the pit lane. So that is it for round 9 of the GT Cup Championship. You can see the cars are being pushed into Parc Fermé area. Parc Fermé, Sam, for those that maybe aren't aware, the area where the cars go for their final technical checks to tick the box that they've all complied with the race regulations.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of the last hurdle of the race. You get to check if the car is everything as it should be. Sometimes when the car's too quick, you might not have enough weight in the car. So it's a final check for the championship, just to make sure you are running the right BOP.
There we go. So that's what's going on there in the scrutineering bay. But congratulations to Morgan Tilbrook and Juro Motorsport. They claim the win in round 9 of the GT Cup Championship here at Snetterton. Don't forget, you can join us back later on today when we've got our sprint race coming up just after 4 o'clock. So from Sam Neary and myself, Mark Werrell, thanks for joining us. We'll see you later on. Goodbye.